So I saw that new Wonky Willy movie, which is a film that I've actually been looking forward to for a while now. So, did it live up to my pure imagination? Let's find out. Hello there, I'm Ibby and welcome to Cinema Nerd, where today I'm reviewing Wonka, directed by Paul King. If you want more cinema content, then you've got the golden ticket, so make sure to comment, share, like, notification, and hit that subscribe bell.
Strike that. Reverse it.
So I've got a lot to talk about when it comes to this film. The screenplay, direction, filmmaking and presentation, metatextual qualities in relation to the history of the character, Timothée Chalamet's take on it, and on top of that, I thought I'd top it off with some mentions of allegory to Abrahamic theology and themes pertaining to socioeconomic theory, because that's just how I roll. But I want to start by addressing the fundamental question. Why make this movie? Well, it's because from Warner Brothers' perspective, a family film from a recognizable IP released right before Christmas during the height of holiday spending sounds like a decently safe financial play. But disregarding the commercial and focusing on the artistic, what is it trying to accomplish? Okay, so basically you've got this property on your hands. You have the rights to adapt this road dog classic. It has one super classic and beloved movie from the 70s that was low-key a flop at first, but was a massive hit later on. And then you've also got a Tim Burton movie that's much closer to the book but much less well received. So what do we do with this property? Well, it should probably feature its most popular character, right? Who is obviously protagonist Willy Wonka. It's Willy Wonka. Who is by far the most popular thing about this franchise. In its most revered incarnation, the film is called Willy Wonka in the Chocolate Factory, even though the novel off which it's based is called Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, which is indicative of how much emphasis the filmmakers put on Wonka, a decision Dahl infamously disliked. Even the Burton remake, a supposed return to form and loyal adaptation, puts a lot of focus on Wonka. He's the star of this property, because he's simply the most fascinating part. There's a reason he's the subject of such rampant speculation, especially in the 1971 film. But wait, is this a prequel to the Gene Wilder Willy Wonka, or its own thing? It's presented as the origin story of Willy Wonka, but which Willy Wonka? It's in this weird middle ground between being in the same continuity as the original and being in its own world. At least, that's what people think in relation to the marketing. The casting, production design, and changes to the lore all indicate that it's its own thing, but then why does it actively revel so heavily in the iconography of and allusions to the original? Chalamet's costume is very reminiscent of Wilder's, the Oompa Loompa appears the same, countless lines of dialogue are repurposed, and both the musical numbers and score are filled with homages to the original. The answer is pretty simple. It gets people all nostalgic, and it's the easiest way to make money. But artistically, I think I've cracked the case as to why it's in such a weird spot. You see, this film definitely takes place in a heightened reality. This is both stylistic and semantic. One major plot point is literally about public officials being bribed with chocolate. But it falls squarely into fairy tale, childlike genre conventions and tropes, intentionally so, I might add. It's because this movie feels like the makings of not the Wilder Willy Wonka, but the idea of Willy Wonka. The fascinating character whom we know barely anything about because he just has this intangible aura, this fantastical nature that we only get a glimpse of. He's the ultimate manifestation of the eccentric genius, the imaginative and brilliant entrepreneur who built an empire on the back of his wit and ingenuity, but is perhaps odd or awkward. We look up to him for that reason. There's more depth to it than that, which I'll get to later, but that's why he fits the uplifting rags to riches rise story so well. So the artistic reason for it to be so consumed by visual and auditory tributes to Wilder's Wonka is because that's the most iconic iteration of this character, and thus the one who best encapsulates the idea of Willy Wonka, not the person. Because he's not a very fleshed out person in this film either. He hardly has anything of a character arc. But regardless, this feels like a bankable movie that also has serious attention paid to its craft. I feel as though it was a stroke of genius to have Paul King be the main driving force creatively of this film, because with the Paddington movies, he cemented himself as one of, if not the best children's filmmaker of this modern age. His storytelling sensibilities are just so in tune with the kind of thing you'd be looking for in a family film about the rise of Willy Wonka. Putting it into the Paddington template fits like a glove, but part of me feels as though some of its more naive and optimistic connotations conflict with the seemingly deliberate ominousness of that original, which is theorized about so intensely due to a lot of things about it that just don't hit right when interpreted at face value. But I think this movie does manage to work quite well on its own merits, so let's talk about who they chose to fill the shoes of Willy Wonka. Timothée Chalamet. Timothée Chalamet. Timothée Chalamet? I'm calling him Timothy. He's one of the biggest up-and-coming actors in Hollywood today, and his record as both a performer and a celebrity, personality, star thing doesn't exactly scream lead character of a bright and cheery children's movie. On screen, he usually plays a teenager or young adult who's in a really dark place and has issues, or a supporting role who's laid back and chill. For the first one, think Call Me By Your Name, Bones and All, and Dune. And for the second one, think Lady Bird, or Don't Look Up. I don't exactly think all of those characters are great or even good, but when given good material, he excels and shows a lot of potential. My favorite thing from him so far is definitely Paul Atreides and Dune. On top of that is his public persona as this mix of a cool, hip, popular guy and a kind of weird man baby. Like, bro, what is this fit? Did he just forget to wear a shirt? Like, he's split between being the Rizzler and the stoner quiet kid. Doesn't seem like the type to be singing super upbeat songs in a musical, and yet the man has proven he has range. He pulls it off really well. You just believe this somewhat absurd character, and it never feels fake or contrived. And from now on, I won't question whatever kind of role he's cast in, unless it's like Superman or something. And he's got pipes. I'm no expert on singing, but this vocal performance never seemed off to me. I'm not quite sure if you can compare him to Wilder's Willy Wonka, who, in my view, gave one of the greatest performances ever seen on film. But they're going for very different things, and for the way this character is written in this adaptation, he does the job well. But of course, an actor is only as good as that which they are acting off of, and that's where the script comes in. And I think it serves its purpose really well. It's not the centerpiece by any means, but it's good all around, with a myriad of clever jokes, callbacks to events in this film or previous ones, though some things did somewhat feel out of place to me. One aspect where this applies is Hugh Grant as an Oompa Loompa. It's fun to see him, but when he's on screen, which is an albeit short amount of time, he feels kind of shoehorned in. He doesn't have much of a real place in the story, and it feels more like there was either a studio mandate or some general desire to have Oompa Loompas make an appearance, but they couldn't figure out an organic way to fit them in the story. Some of the emotional elements also feel sort of tacked on. There's a little bit of rumination on the relationship between a child Willy Wonka and his mother, which was hit or miss depending on the scene. The character I resonated least with is a side character, this little girl called Noodle. There's a really half-baked mystery element with her, and she gets much more character development than even Wonka, but it's where the vividness of this movie gets bogged down for standard narrative tropes. However, it is pretty excusable since the appeal is not necessarily the intricacies of the plot and its mechanics, but by getting sucked into this world and enthralled by the musical numbers, and more poignantly, the visual splendor. It's actually dazzling what they're able to accomplish. The actual original songs are fairly catchy, but the camera work and choreography and just overall planning evokes this feeling that I struggle to describe. You're sort of just left to enjoy the ride. The flashiness of it is baked into the concept. Now, of course, a concept like this in 2023 requires heavy use of CGI, and most of the visual effects are digital. Now, sometimes that does make it feel intangible, but I don't think a use of CGI should have the negative connotation that's attained in film criticism. It's a tool, just like any other. It just happens to get messed up sometimes. But it's the area where it's easiest to notice flaws, especially since a little virus you might have heard of hit the world. And among its less significant effects was disrupting the entire Hollywood system, and some things like this just fall through the cracks. I distinctly remember that there are a couple of shots that feature a lot of liquid chocolate in a contained space, and it looks like it was made in Blender in under a day. You can just see that it doesn't look right, nor do the CG character models in the same scene. It does, admittedly very briefly, give you that Spy Kids 3 Shark Boy and Lava Girl vibe. But overall, it's a very well-crafted film from a technical perspective. I don't anticipate it'll win any Oscars, but I wouldn't be surprised if it racked up a couple of technical nominations. Overall, it's a pretty well-done family film that has a lot of genuine heart and effort put into it. On its own merits, without any semblance of the greater IP, it's a fun time and feels super reminiscent of what Paul King was able to offer with the Paddington movies. I enjoyed it a lot as just a standalone experience. That said, it does live in the shadow of the Wonka IP, connecting itself directly to the 1971 film in particular. So it would be a disservice to this crucial set of creative choices to neglect how it stacks up in comparison to the classic directed by Mel Stewart. More specifically, how it sort of remixes a lot of the deeper and perhaps more sinister or mysterious connotations that I personally love but don't fit the objective here, and turns those elements into a hopeful final package. Now, I can't speak for the impression that Roald Dahl creates with the novels. I haven't read it. I remember my elementary school principal read one chapter of it to the students one time. I don't remember why, but that's the extent of my personal experience with the book. But with the Wilder film, a lot of it is just odd. Weird and abnormal. And not because it's a children's movie with fantastical elements and a heightened internal logic. No, it's just crafted in such a way, seemingly a deliberate way, to just hit different, to just be that tiniest bit off. And most of that revolves around Wonka himself. You just never really know Wonka. You're simultaneously confused and skeptical and in awe of him all at the same time. The movie never really communicates what his deal is, seeing as it sends a lot of mixed messages about him. He's just so intriguing in such a layered way beyond what you would expect from a simple children's story. There's a reason that this supporting character receives so much interest in future adaptations and in the public consciousness. When Tim Burton attempted to bring the book to the big screen in a way much more true in style and substance to the source material, everyone hated or at least mildly resented it. Also, fun fact, when I was about to watch the 2005 Tim Burton Johnny Depp film for the first time, this was like several years ago, for some reason I thought it was a legacy sequel, and that it would be about Charlie from the 1971 film doing his own golden ticket contest. I don't know, I was a dumb kid. On the whole, this new movie captures the original's whimsy in both a childlike optimistic way and in a twisted way that's ripe for speculation. So here's the part where I overanalyze the original, but trust me, I think it shows this version of Wonka in a new light that I haven't ever seen recognized. So this new film is very much a movie paralleling the American, or at least Western, idea of a crafty and hardworking person starting from the bottom and making it to the top. An ideal representation of how a capitalist system works, or at least is supposed to work. It actually directly props up its setting to be compared to New York City, with imagery and history often idolized before it's seen. What I really didn't expect is for Wonka in this film to be portrayed as a literal immigrant fresh off the boat, and of course with an absurdly small amount of money. That's actually the narrative thrust of the opening musical number. He's literally coming to the new world to experience the American dream, or something analogous to that. It's this wholehearted, optimistic story that we've heard time and time again, and continue to debate in regards to what extent it's actually true or achievable. And though this may seem coincidental, it actually contrasts the original's portrayal of how Wonka thrives off of capitalism. While this film sees his rise from poverty to prosperity, showing the bright side of what the modern free world has to offer, the original, either inadvertently or really cleverly and subtly, shows the dark side of the developed and interconnected world we live in. Wonka, this guy we're meant to be idolizing, completely isolated himself from the rest of the world due to the threat of trade secrets getting out, and literally laid off his entire workforce. The mystery of what happened to Wonka's factory to make it run without workers is exchanged in the Wilder film for a general mystique and creepy allure. He also replaces his workers with Oompa Loompas who are actual slaves, unpaid laborers, which this new film sidesteps by not touching that part of the lore and somewhat retconning it. In some ways, the original has a cautionary element to it, and warns us not to be like the 4 golden ticket winners who were in Charlie, but also, in an ironic way, to be skeptical of people like Willy Wonka, who everyone aspires to in an almost religious sort of way in that movie, scrambling like sheep, like goats, to win golden tickets and singing about his greatness. It's almost a sociological story. This film takes that spirit and turns the people on top into big chocolate, or something like that. They literally call them cartels, and whereas our protagonist is usually the man on top, here he's the scrappy underdog fighting corruption and the systems that keep people in poverty. It even shows how institutions like law enforcement and organized religion can be corrupted when these chocolate cartels bribe them with, well, chocolate. Of course, it's in a jovial and comedic way, but the social commentary is ever present. It even maintains that twinge of darkness that colored Wilder's depiction of Wonka, going as far as to directly compare his chocolates to drugs and alcohol. The people in charge of the chocolate companies are even dressed like high-ranking members of the mob. Beyond that, I actually have a crazily evidenced theory that the original is meant to be interpreted as allegorical to a lot of biblical narratives, and if you'd like me to do a super in-depth analysis on Wilder's portrayal of Wonka, exploring that and a lot of other weird aspects of that film, do let me know, because I think it's super fascinating once you look into it. But in light of the original film's dark undertones, a lot of the hollowness I observed for the majority of the runtime, whenever things felt underdeveloped or rushed or forced, completely dissipated in the last few minutes, where they lean super heavily into the sights and sounds of the '71 classic. That's when it all clicked. After being set up, but not fully paid off with this lingering sense of when is it gonna come full circle, it all just came together, and I recognize the creative intent behind this when they go full force into paying homage to pure imagination, those themes, those ideas. That original film is a gateway into film analysis in my view, because the way so many decisions just feel subtly off makes it morbidly intriguing. As such, my ideal future adaptation of this material is one that goes all in to those unsettling idiosyncrasies that come together to create Wilder's legendary character. But that's not something that this film was trying to accomplish. It reimagines the lore of Willy Wonka into something wholesome and optimistic, into a heroic rise rather than a telling reign at the top. It turns the man who crippled the entire economy of a city based off of Munich but not quite set in any particular place, the dude who laid off his entire workforce to protect his corporate interest, the guy whose idea of philanthropy is putting on a pay-to-win sweepstakes lottery, into a wide-eyed immigrant, coming off the boat and embracing a setting which pays homage to the American cultural identity, and toiling in the same poverty that he neglected in the original. It adores its source material, but remixes it into something new, original, and valuable, and it was a treat to experience. I saw this film opening weekend with some family friends of mine, and one of them started giggling next to me during the last musical number. I was initially perplexed, but leaned forward to see at the very front row of the theater, right ahead of the screen, was this goofy kid, probably somewhere between 3 and 5 years old, dancing around to the music on screen. He literally threw his hoodie into the air and blocked some of the projection when a money note hit just as his dad stopped him from dancing. Normally, this kind of misbehavior from children would be extremely annoying, detracting from the viewing experience of paying customers just trying to watch the movie undisturbed. But in a coincidental and weirdly kind of beautiful way, this, right here, the kind of thing that just makes a kid get up and dance, was the intended effect. To filter the cruel and unforgiving world we live in, shifting it into a blissful, storybook-like reality that perhaps we should aspire to emulate in our real lives. It's difficult to make clear how these layers of meaning could be communicated by a kid dancing around in a theater while a musical children's movie was playing, but isn't that what art is for? To say the things that we otherwise can't? Though it's by no means superior to its inspirations, nor one of the best films to release this year, it's a well-crafted and delightful experience. Wonka truly was pure imagination. Thank you so much for watching. Please do share your thoughts on the film and this video in the comment section. Like, subscribe, hit the bell, share, all those YouTube things. You just being here means a lot. So, have a good one. Oompa, loompa, doopa dee dappy. If you subscribe, then I will be happy. That was dumb. I shouldn't do that.